Hi everyone, this is the first video in a series on setting up a small AR application within Unity. This first video is just going to be a quick one just to kind of look through sort of the project setup and what you need to do to kind of get going. So I'm using Unity 2019.3. This should work pretty much on any version after Unity 2018.1.2. But if you're working on this from home, then I'd recommend just getting the Unity Hub and making sure that you're working with the most recent version. So I've just created a new blank project. We're going to have a look through kind of setting up a couple of things first, just to get ready for development. One thing to note is that this is going to be setting up an AR project specifically for Android devices. So I don't own an iOS device, and even if I did, to develop for iOS you need to have a Mac, because developing for iOS requires Xcode, which can only be done using sort of Mac OS environment. So this will be basically geared towards creating an application for an Android device in the end. So first thing that we're going to do is go and look at the package manager. So we're going to have to install a couple of external packages ready to actually use the AR functionality within Unity. So let's go to Window and Package Manager, and we're just going to make sure we go to Advanced and Show Preview Packages, and this is going to highlight everything that you can put into your project. So we're just going to go up to A at the top, and let's have a look at what we need to basically pull into this project. So the first thing that we're going to need to pull in is the AR Foundation package. So the AR Foundation package, a collection of mono behaviors and C# utilities for working with AR subsystems. So we are going to be using quite a few things from AR Foundation and the subsystem libraries, things like tracking for sort of planes and surfaces, things like that. So make sure that you install that package. Just give it a couple of seconds. There we go. So once that's done, you'll see a little tick just next to the packages that you've got installed. The other things that we need to bring in here, you'll see that there's a couple of other options for AR packages. We've got AR Core and AR Kit. Now, AR Core is basically sort of Google's bundled libraries for developing AR applications for Android. AR Kit is Apple's sort of alternative for iOS devices. So because I'm not going to be developing this for iOS, we're going to make sure that we grab the AR Core plugin and just make sure we install that as well. So again, just give this a couple of seconds to import into your project, and as before, you'll see it'll have the little tick there to say that it's in. So you can just close that off. And the next thing we'll have to have a look at is just basically setting up the actual build settings. So this is in File. Let's go to Build Settings, and you'll see at the minute that we are currently building for PC, Mac and Linux. Obviously that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure we're building for Android. So let's just say switch platform, and you'll see that once it's transferred over, you'll get the little Unity icon just next to the Android logo. There we go. So this is ready to go for Android. So let's go to the player settings. There's a couple of things that you need to set up here to get ready for building this to your Android device. So firstly, would recommend putting in your name for company name. You can change the name of your product name. Obviously it just takes what you've saved your project as, so mine was AR Demo. If we have a look down here in the identification section, you'll see that your package name will take your name and the name of your product, which is good, so that's all good. And the last thing to change here for the minimum API level, AR Core currently is supported only from Android 7 and above. So just make sure in the drop-down list that you set this to Android 7. Now, conversely, at the bottom down here, you'll see, I say conversely, we've got some XR settings down here, and there is an AR Core supported check-in here. Now, what I found is, whilst I've been kind of playing around with this, if you have this selected, when you go to build, it will notify you that there is a conflict. So just make sure that you don't have this selected. As long as you've got the AR Core plugin, then that's fine. So leave that set off. And the last thing to change before we start building stuff is we go into the other settings. And if you have a look under the graphics APIs, just make sure that you select Vulkan and just remove. The AR Core specifically requires the OpenGL ES3 API. It will throw you an error if you're trying to build with the Vulkan API. It needs to be the OpenGL ES. Okay, so we can just close all that off. And let's just go and save our scene. I think we've already got it saved. Okay, sample scene. I'm just going to rename this to our AR scene. Just reload it. We didn't have anything in it anyway. And in the build settings, just make sure that that scene is in the build. Okay, the last thing, just to kind of set up a couple of AR elements within the scene before we kind of conclude this video. In your hierarchy manager, if we right click now and just have a look under XR, you'll see that because we've imported all of the AR Core and AR Foundation stuff, packages into the project, we've got all of the AR sort of objects that we can add into the scene. So we'll want to make sure that we add in an AR session, and the AR session is basically a game object that has a couple of scripts on that basically just handle the entire sort of AR functionality for your project. So we need to make sure that we have an AR session within your project. We'll also need to make sure, if we go to XR, that we have an AR session origin as well. So the session origin denotes sort of the center of your sort of AR scene. You'll also see that it comes bundled with an AR camera. So we'll want to make sure that we just get rid of the main camera first, and we're using the AR camera as our sort of actual output camera. So the AR camera, if we get that selected, just go over into the inspector on the right hand side, and under the tag section, just make sure that you retag this as the main camera. So having this tagged as main camera allows you in your code to grab reference to the main camera of your scene, but to be able to do that, it needs to know what the main camera is, so we'll just kind of highlight it as such. The final thing to add to our session origin are just a couple of additional components that are going to make our life a bit easier to use later on. So if we just select the session origin game object, let's just have a look in the inspector and go to add component, and we'll want to make sure that we firstly add in an AR plane manager. And the plane manager is a sort of a script that allows you to handle detection of surfaces. So you can specify if you want to detect everything, which will kind of highlight horizontal surfaces like tables and floors, or vertical surfaces as well, like walls. So if you've got planned functionality for both of those kinds of surfaces, you'll want to leave this set to everything. If you just want to use floor planes or tables or other surfaces, then you might want to set this to just horizontal. Finally, we need to add onto this session origin game object a AR raycast manager. Now, the Raycast Manager is a newer component that kind of supersedes some of the built-in functionality of the AR Session Origin script. This basically, it's a manager to handle raycasting from the camera. So raycasting, as you'd be familiar from when we've looked at Unity before, is basically just sort of throwing out invisible lines from an origin and basically storing information from whatever that ray hits within your scene. With the Raycast Manager for AR, it's a little bit more clever. It basically looks at the sort of the input camera data you're getting, and it can process sort of different types of surfaces. So we're going to be using some functionality from this to detect surface planes and things like that. So that kind of covers all of the objects that you're going to need within the scene. In the next video, we're going to have a look at kind of setting up a simple object and then kind of having a look at how it works within your scene, and then we'll start looking at some more complex raycasting.